State of Wisconsin versus James Prokopovitz, 19 CF 716. Appearances, please.
Deputy District Attorney Wendy Lefcourt, Assistant District Attorney Caleb Saunders appear on behalf of the state, along with Special Agent Jay Yurgis of DCI and Sergeant Roman Ehrenstein of the Brown County Sheriff's Department.
Your Honor, James Prokopovitz appears in person, being assisted by Counsel Attorney John D'Angelo, also being assisted by my paralegal Bonnie Godfrey.
All right, can we bring in the jury? All right, all rise. Good morning, welcome back, and you may be seated. State may call the next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Larry Warwick to the stand.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. And you have to get real close and almost have the microphone under the visor, just like that. Would you state and then spell your name, please?
Larry Warwick, Larrywarwick.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Warwick.
Good morning.
Are you employed?
I am.
How are you employed?
I am state of Wisconsin licensed private detective.
Okay. And how long have you been a private detective?
Almost 16 years.
Okay. Previous to being a private detective, did you have any other law enforcement experience?
Yes, I was a lieutenant with the West Dallas Police Department. I retired in 2007 after 31 years of law enforcement.
Okay. So the West Dallas, is that near the Milwaukee area?
Yes, it's in Milwaukee County.
All right. And you retired as a lieutenant. How many years were you there?
31.
With respect to your role as retiring as a lieutenant, previous to that, were you a patrol officer?
I started out in patrol, and I went to plainclothes, and then I was promoted to detective, and eventually detective sergeant, and then lieutenant.
Okay. So with respect to your work at the West Dallas, and I guess I should ask you, previous to your work at the West Dallas Police Department, were you employed by any other law enforcement agency?
Yeah, I was 2 years with St. Francis, City of St. Francis, also in Milwaukee County.
Okay. So with respect to your formal experience as a law enforcement officer, you would have 33 years with regard to the West Dallas Police Department in St. Francis?
I'm sorry, the 31 years is including the St. Francis.
Got it. So like 29 and 2.
Yeah.
So you have 31 years of formal law enforcement experience with agencies, and then you have an additional 16 years as a private detective?
Correct.
Okay. So in total, 47 years of either experience as a law enforcement officer or private detective?
Correct, and thank you for reminding me of that.
Now, with respect to that, in your position as a law enforcement officer with St. Francis and West Dallas, you indicated that you had been plainclothes detective, promoted up to lieutenant. Did you have training and experience with respect to investigating criminal instances of conduct?
I did.
And on occasion, did those include homicide investigations?
They did.
Did you also have training and experience with respect to taking statements from alleged victims
Yes, I did.
and witnesses,
Yes,
as well as suspects?
that's correct.
Did you also have training and experience with respect to taking items of evidence into custody?
Not so much. We mostly relied on our evidence techs and such to do that in West Allis.
Oh, so you had agencies where you had people specialized just as the evidence custodians?
Correct.
Okay. But you would have experience with respect to running investigations and assisting your colleagues as such?
That's correct.
Now, with regard to experience in doing interviews, is it important when you are conducting interviews of particularly anybody alleged to have been involved in a crime that you are looking for consistencies or inconsistencies in what they tell you?
Absolutely.
Is it also important for you to watch their demeanor and watch the way they answer questions?
That's correct.
Now, in your role as a law enforcement officer, and so I'm catching here, you had 31 years with regard to that, you then transcended into a private detective, is that right?
That's correct.
Do you work with anybody else?
Originally, we started Milwaukee Private Detectives, which was 4 members of an LLC, and we ended up closing that business down, and I'm now a single-member LLC.
Okay, kind of freelancing?
Yeah, yes.
Now, do you, in your role as a private detective, do you work on jobs where people pay you?
Yes,
Do you also work on jobs where you donate your time?
that's correct.
Why do you do that?
It all depends upon the situation. A lot of times, if a family needs some help, they don't have a lot of money, then I'll do something pro bono for them.
Okay. And are you solicited to assist by private families as well as other agencies to get involved in that manner?
Yes,
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to the year of 2014. At some point, did you become aware of a pending investigation involving the disappearance of a Victoria Prokopovitz?
I did.
And how did that happen?
So in 2013, I had attended a couple of meetings and events with the Rapids Search and Rescue, which was an organization that did actual physical searching for people that were missing. I volunteered my services to them in the form of if they would need some investigating or taking statements and such. I wasn't too excited about tramping through the woods and cornfields and such, but that was my way of volunteering.
And Rapid Search and Rescue, that was an agency that you were familiar with?
Yes,
Was there an individual associated with that agency, a Sherry Jo Lucas?
that's correct.
Was she one of the individuals that contacted you?
Yes,
Okay. So at some point, she approaches you or through her efforts at Rapid Search and Seizure, and there's a request for you to assist in the investigation with Vicki?
yes. She gave me a call and said that she had been contacted by Marcia Loritz, and Marcia was wondering if it would help to hire a private detective to find out what happened with her mom, Vicki, who was missing.
And who was Marcia identified to you with respect to her role or her relationship with Vicki?
Vicki's daughter.
Now, when you just made a reference to being paid, were you paid for your assistance on this?
No,
You volunteered your time?
yes,
Now, you indicated or mentioned that you were made aware of Marcia. At some point, did you have contact with Marcia?
yes, we spoke on the phone. Sherry Jo had given Marcia my contact information. We spoke on the phone, and then we later met.
And at the time that you met Marcia, then she's identified to you as Vicki's daughter.
Correct.
Did you have cause, previous to any interviews, to have contact with any other member of the family, or is that kind of it until your interview?
Until the interview, I just dealt with Marcia.
Okay. Now, at the time that you're meeting with Marcia, does she give you some information as she knows it regarding her mom's disappearance?
Yes.
Do you review anything else before you do an interview?
I met with Detective Ehrenstein from the Brown County Sheriff's Office, and I had told Marcia, I said, I don't know what Brown County will share with me as far as the investigation, because it's an ongoing investigation. You have to understand that this wasn't a cold case at that time. It was an active, dynamic investigation that was going on. And basically, I told Marcia, I said, if they'll share with me the reports and such, I will read through the reports to see if it's feasible to hire a private detective. It may not be. If in an active investigation, I don't want to go hindering the sheriff's office investigation to do talking to witnesses and such things that they have already either done or will do.
Did you make contact with Sergeant Ehrenstein?
I did.
Okay. And was he willing to have you assist with
Yes.
respect?
They graciously let me, gave me copies of all the police reports that I could read through.
And with respect to that, did you have an opportunity to view the attitude of law enforcement towards this investigation? You indicated they were still actively searching?
Yes.
And were they looking for any assistance they could get?
Yeah, I would say yes. I would add that Detective Ehrenstein struck me as a very meticulous, thorough detective, and they were doing an excellent job, I thought, of following up on leads and investigating.
So after you've now reviewed some more information about the disappearance of Vicky, did you then have cause to meet with anybody? And I direct your attention to April 3rd of 2014.
Yes, I met with Vicky, also was, I'm sorry, not Vicky, Marcia. I met with Stacey, I believe Marcia's husband, and Wes, as well as James Prokopovitch at his residence.
And do you recall where this meeting took place?
It was in the kitchen of the residence.
And that residence, is that 5118 Coonish Road?
Yes.
Now, at the time that you conducted this interview, was this something that was recorded?
Yes,
And was that recording then turned over to law enforcement?
it was.
Okay. I can read that. So, Your Honor, by stipulation of the parties, there have been some areas that were removed. If I can have a minute. So, Your Honor, for purposes of the record, the state would indicate that we are going to be showing a redacted version. Again, there are portions of this that there's some dead time that was taken out just to facilitate this for the jury. There were also some other things that had to be removed by stipulation of the parties. So the portions on this redacted video include that we will be playing it from 1743 to 4408. That's the first clip. The second clip is 4628 to 4927. (5124) to 5805, and 1 hour 23 seconds to 1 hour, 1 minute, 48 seconds. It should be a total of 37 minutes and 30 seconds. And we'll mark it as an exhibit.
All right. Will this be on the big screen? No, this is just audio?
That's audio.
Okay.
Mr. Saunders is kind of in charge of that. So, Your Honor, we're going to move for the addition of Exhibit 83 because it's by stipulation.
Any objection to 83, Mr. D'Angelo?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, 83 is admitted.
And for the record, then, we are playing Exhibit 83 with a request that we can publish it.
You may.
So let's look at a week prior to when she disappeared. How was she?
She seemed all right.
Yeah.
She didn't, like the day or the night she disappeared, we were at Cypress that day.
We'll get into that in a minute, but I want to know her attitude or how she was like a week prior.
Seemed to be all right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know how to explain her. She would come home one day and she'd be at this time. You'd come home the next day, she'd be in a different mood. There'd be days where all she wanted was to lay in bed. There'd be days she'd come home and she'd be cleaning and you know, I mean, it was up and down, up and down, up and down. It's that simple. I don't know how to explain it.
There was mention about medication, and and I realized that she had attempted to hurt herself a couple other occasions prior to this. You locked up her medications, or not?
I didn't lock it up, not at the end, no. And actually, what she attempted before, she took aspirin. You know, I mean, it wasn't like she took her medication.
Did she have medication at that time that she could have taken?
Yes.
So you don't think that this was a viable attempt? You don't think she was really trying to kill herself? You thought maybe this was just an attempt?
When she took the aspirin?
Yeah.
Wes found her. No, that time she left a note.
Yeah,
She was writing a note and ended up when you found her at home.
Pills all over, she knocked her pill bottles over.
Yeah, but it was basically aspirin she took.
She hit the bottles.
Yeah.
So she had access to her medication anytime she wanted to take it?
I had it in a box, locked.
No, that's what I asked you.
Yeah, well, locked, but she knew where the key was.
Okay.
And like her medication, the doctor had told her, you know, she said, some days I don't want to take that Xanax 3 or 4 times a day. She said, I don't need it. He said, that's fine. If you feel you need one or you need it, take one.
Did you have any discussion with her as far as how she felt when she needed it? I mean,
Not,
how was your communication with her at close before she disappeared? Were you guys talking, or were you?
yeah, we were. You know, I mean, it was, you had to know her. I can't explain it.
Yeah.
You know, people just, I can't explain it. You know, I mean, just literally, the girls know, they could try and explain it. I mean, you know what, that time when she tore the house apart in Ashwaubenon, remember?
She had to break down.
She had the breakdown, yes.
Well, he was in bed with his daughter.
Yeah, but I mean, just literally,
That would upset me too.
yeah.
It's gross.
Yeah.
And she,
I think mom was diagnosed with being bipolar, and that's her whole mood swing.
yeah,
And I don't think mom was ever on meds for her bipolar, to tell you the truth. Was she?
not that I know of, no. It was more for
Because
depression,
when we asked you about pills, you said Xanax and a sleeping pill was all she was on
yeah, Xanax and a sleeping pill
at the
and,
end.
Xanax is mostly described for depression.
yeah, and then she had for a while there, she was taking a sleeping pill that they had, but,
And she was taking a while back before that, and she went off of it because she was nervous about the stuff she saw on TV about it.
Oh, cripes, all the stuff they see on
It's-
TV.
no, I know which one you're gonna say, I can't think of it,
It's
Marcia.
for depression, it's for bipolar, I think it is, or for depression, but it's in conjunction with something else.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Cymbalta,
Cymbalta,
that's it.
yes.
And then she
Cymbalta.
went off of it because she was
Yeah,
scared
she
of
was
it.
afraid of it, you know.
Yeah, because it can cause your arms to fall off.
Well, your depression gets,
Side effects are worse than that.
your depression gets worse or
Right,
what have you, and yeah,
Yeah, okay.
she went off of that. But as far as, she always took good care of herself up until she had that surgery. I mean, she was always, always cleaned up and fixed up and dressed up and, up until a little, when she was getting sick there. And I kept telling her, honey, let's go to that, we'll go to that. No, I'm not going to a doctor. I'm not going to a doctor again. I'm not going to a doctor again.
And this was after the cancer? Before the cancer?
Before yeah.
And then ultimately went to the doctor, found out that she had cancer.
Yeah. And everything, doctor said, everything turned out fine, right? Everything was good. It was.
Did you guys, your social life with her, did you go out to dinner periodically?
We'd go out to dinner once in a while. She'd come uptown with me and.
She'd what?
We'd go uptown, have a few drinks. She liked to play the poker machines or,
Sure.
stuff like that.
How often did you do that?
Sometimes once a week, sometimes twice a week, sometimes you wouldn't go for a week, or 2 weeks or.
So it wasn't that she was afraid to leave the house.
No, she wasn't really afraid. You had to coax her, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
But, and she, once you get her out, she'd have a good time. It was just getting her out,
Sure.
The house was her pride and joy, as you can sort of, if you'd look all over, I
We
mean,
always teased her, the walls are gonna fall down.
What walls you can't see? Oh, yeah, there are some.
go down in the basement,
Oh my God.
go look in there. I mean, that was her,
Well, and taking care of this was a full-time job.
Yeah, I can imagine.
and she'd start, and then she'd tear a room apart, and then she'd decide, I gotta take, and pretty soon she'd have 2 rooms apart. Then she'd say, it's a mess. I said, honey, it's not dirty. There's you, me, and Wes in here. It's dirty, it's dirty, it's dirty. She had a clean fetish, or what do you want to call it?
She was OCD with being.
Yeah, everything, she was a clean freak,
But
yes.
that comes from her upbringing, because she had the shit beat out of her if it wasn't clean,
Yeah.
so.
The day before she went missing, you obviously went to work. Came home. What time you usually get? What time?
I got home early, because we had to go to the psychiatrist that afternoon.
Okay.
So I got home a little bit early.
Yeah, what
Went
time
to
was that?
I got home about 1:30, and I think the psychiatrist's appointment was for 4 o'clock. 1:30, 2 o'clock I got home. I left early. Psychiatrist's appointment for 4 o'clock, 4:30. So by the time I got home, picked her up, went back to Green Bay, and she went into the psychiatrist. We came back, and I said, I gotta run to the shop, man. I gotta fill up my timesheet and that. And I said, and I called her. I said, you want me to stop at Super Ron's? I'll pick up a chicken, roasted chicken, and yeah. And I brought chicken home, and yeah, we sat down here and ate supper and everything. Wes was down, we ate, and
For the record, the state's stopping at 8:33. In the reference on that video, did Jim just indicate to you that he called Vicky on that date from his car on his way home about chicken?
That's correct.
The psychiatrist, did you go in with her to the psychiatrist?
Not the last time. I didn't all the time, once in a while I did.
Once in a while you would, and why would you go sometimes?
He would want me or she would want me.
Okay, so the psychiatrist or Vicky wanted you to go in?
I'd go in.
But otherwise you'd stay in the waiting room?
I'd stay in the waiting room.
And that day
I went in with her,
you did go in?
and she wasn't happy with that psychiatrist.
Did she have a lot of conversation with the psychiatrist that day?
Not a lot,
But she
like
talked.
that I remember, she talked, not a lot. Talking more about the medication than,
In regards to medication, when she took her medication, did you dispense it to her?
I would give it to her in the morning before I leave. And I had a thing where I put what she's supposed to take, like at noon. And then at night, and some of them, like the sleeping pills, sometimes she didn't want to take a sleeping pill. I don't need it tonight. Well, I didn't force it on her. And like I say, even the Xanax, I can't remember what or no, I can't remember the other one.
So, okay, so you would put her pills out for her during the day while you were at work?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got home from the psychiatrist, and what was the conversation?
For the record, we're stopping it at 10:18. Now, investigator, or Mr. Warwick, you're indicating previous in the interview, when you're speaking to Jim, you were asking about the opportunity for pills to be available to Vicky. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And when you're initially asking Jim about the pills, at some point, he indicated that he had it in a box locked, and now you're questioning him that that's different than what he originally said. Is that
Yes.
right?
He originally said that he didn't lock them up.
Okay.
And then he said that he kept the medication in a box locked. And I said, that's what I asked you before. And then he said, well, it was a locked box, but she knew where the key was.
And now, with respect to what was just stated in the interview now he was indicating that he's the one dispensing the pills to Vicky. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And with respect to that, is it important in an investigation for you like this to determine who would have had control of things in that household?
That's correct.
What did you have at the time? What kind of vehicle did you have? Truck? Car?
Truck. Yeah.
What was the conversation like on the way home from the psychiatrist?
She didn't really say a whole lot. It just didn't talk. Didn't seem to talk. I said, well, what do you think, honey? What? I just don't like her. I don't like talking to her. I feel uncomfortable. She was more upset with the psychiatrist than anything.
She got a new prescription that day?
No.
She didn't?
No.
When did she get her last prescription?
Last new one? Well, she had refills, like for the Xanax and that. And I used to pick them up at CVS all the time.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Did she get a refill that day? Refill prescription?
No, I didn't refill nothing.
No.
They were due.
Did she get a script, a prescription from the doctor that day?
No, I don't think so. She still had refills left on the Xanax and that. The only one, no, she didn't get, one came by prescription that had to come every month. But the Xanax had like 3 or 4 refills on it or whatever. And I always refilled them. When they were due, I'd take them into CVS. Because they were open 24 hours a day. I'd just leave a little bit early for work, stop there at 5 o'clock in the morning, wait 10 minutes and get a fill.
So if you remember, how many pills did she have left the day that?
They were almost all due to be refilled. And I think there were even some left in the bottle yet.
Okay, do you remember roughly how many?
I don't remember. I don't. There weren't many. I know that.
Do you remember having an argument with her in the truck on the way home?
No.
Remember having a discussion with her in the truck on the way home about a tablecloth?
No.
Because your first statement to the police was that she wanted to stop and buy a tablecloth, and you said you couldn't, that you had to go up and get your timesheet. That was your statement to the police. Remember anything about a tablecloth that day?
No, I don't remember saying anything about a tablecloth. Maybe I did, but...
I know, it's a year ago.
Your Honor, we're stopping at 12:45. Now, the discussion that you just had in the statement with Jim regarding an argument that evening with Vicky, do you recall that?
I do.
And was his response something you noted?
Yes, it struck me that when I asked the question about an argument, he answered, no, 3 times. 3 denials was a big red flag for me.
Okay. And that was a discussion about discord between him and Vicky on that evening?
That's correct.
Now, you followed up and then you asked him specifically about a tablecloth. What was that in reference to?
I had read in the report, in the police reports, that he had mentioned to the police that there was a discussion about a tablecloth, that she wanted to stop and look for a tablecloth at Target, I think it was, and he didn't want to stop because he had to go home. He had to run up to the shop and do his timesheets.
Yeah,
It's hard sometimes.
I've been asked so many questions. Tablecloth. She may have mentioned something, and I said, well, we'll go to the dollar store. Well, they don't have what I want there. Maybe, that might have been what it was. I don't know. That's a year ago. What happened, going to the doctor with her and coming home. Nothing out of the ordinary, or, it's not like she blew up or we had a fight or an argument. And
So you dropped her at the house, or you brought her in?
I dropped her off the house, she got out. I think I came in even.
Okay.
And then I said, I'll be back. Give me half hour to run, 20 minutes, half hour to run to the shop. The truck up with fuel and stuff. And then I called her on the phone. I said, you want me to stop at Super Rods and I'll pick up a chicken and some potatoes or something else? And will you have?
And you got home that day about what time, if you remember?
What, 5:30, 6 o'clock, huh?
Had your own.
5:30, 6, somewhere in there, 6, a little after 6. Give or take, a little bit. I in there.
Okay. So you were home, Wes?
Yeah, Wes came down and ate with us too that night. Yeah. He was down, he was eating, and
So then, after dinner,
I crawled in my chair, I was watching TV.
remember what you were watching?
No. And I said, I'm gonna go to bed, honey, because I get up at 4:30 in the morning.
Sure. And what time was that, if you remember?
8 o'clock, 8:30, give or take. And I woke up about 3:30, hollered for her. Couldn't find her.
Hollered for her?
I said, honey, you coming to bed? I was laying in bed.
Okay.
She didn't answer, so I got up. I thought, well, maybe she wasn't here. I thought, wherever, went out, looked in the basement, she wasn't there. Looked around, couldn't find her. Not unusual for her to be outside at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning either.
Why is that?
She's a night person. I've gotten up several times out here. She'd be outside at 4 o'clock in the morning working on the flowers. I did. She was a night person. Mm-hmm. She would clean at night. She would wash the car. She was, it didn't surprise me that I couldn't find her right away. And I thought, well, maybe she went for a walk, and she would go for a walk once in a while. Not very far, yard here or whatever. I went outside and I hollered and I looked and walked around. I thought, well, I don't know where she is.
And you said you woke up at what time again?
About 3:30, 4 o'clock.
3:30, 4 o'clock.
I don't remember exactly.
Okay, so then, when you couldn't find her, what did you do?
Went up and down every road around here, driving with the truck, seeing if she was walking somewhere.
Would she normally walk the roads?
She would walk sometimes up this way as far as the next road and go that way and come back. You know, not,
Even at night?
yeah, that night. Not often, but she would. You know, I know she has.
Sure.
And she'd go up to the trail even up here. The Mountain Bay Trail is runs right behind our place. You know, she was a night person, and for her to disappear at night, she would do that before we got married even. She would be gone. And you know she'd be gone. You kids might not remember it all, but there was times she'd be gone at night, I'd be home, and she wouldn't get home until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. But she'd always come home, and just the way she was always a night person. And so I tried calling her on her cell phone. Tried calling, no answer. And I said, well, I told Wes, I said, well, I gotta go to work. You call me if, you know, or whatever. Tried calling a couple more times. I left work early. I got home at 1 o'clock. She wasn't home. That's when I called the cops. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
When you left here to check the roadways and stuff, were you home at the time?
No. He came home after I came back the first time. And I said, I don't know where Mom is. I'm gonna go look again. I'm gonna check the roads again.
And that was what time?
About 4:30, give or take. You know.
What time did you leave the house at? I know there's been some issues about where you were that night and everything. They got that pretty well established, but what time did you leave the house that night?
Probably about 6:30 after we ate.
Yeah, after we ate, I don't know what time after. You know, we ate supper and I sat down in my chair and
You said you went upstairs to bed about 8.
I crawled in bed about 8:30. I don't.
Now, do you remember telling the police at all about hearing her nuke a cup of coffee or something?
I heard her about 9:30. I heard her in here. I know that 8:30, 9. Right after I went to bed. I know she was still here.
Status stopped it at 1853. At the time that you're doing this interview of Jim, he indicates to you that when he went to bed that he knew Victoria was still there.
That's correct.
With respect to investigations and investigating other homicides, is it important for investigators to note who would have been the last possible person to have seen somebody alive?
That's true.
Was that significant in your interview?
Yes.
As far as the reference that you had just made earlier in a discussion with Wes about his time frame being established, were you aware that Wes was alibied out?
Yes.
So he was not present even by Jim's statements that evening?
That's correct.
Okay.
I heard.
You didn't come home at all between 6:30 and 4 in the morning? Okay. So then you came home, she wasn't around, you said you called her cell phone?
Tried calling on the cell phone. Yeah.
Were you in the house when you tried calling the cell phone?
I tried in the house. I tried when I was in the truck. I tried after I got to work. And it wasn't unusual for her not to answer. I didn't know she didn't have a cell phone around at that time. Until the police came. And that's when we found her purse and cell phone and everything was in the house.
We stopped it at 1933. Now, in this interview with the statements that Jim has given to you, is it apparent that he's indicating that he is repeatedly calling Vicky's cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. And were you familiar with the investigation that there just weren't those calls?
Yes.
Where was the cell phone, you remember? In her purse?
Was it in her purse? I don't even remember.
Where'd she have her purse?
Shelley kept it in my cabinet.
Yeah, in the cabinet, I think, in the bedroom there. I think that's where it was. Wasn't like left, sat on the table or nothing. She threw it in the drawer or in the cabinet or something. I don't remember where it was.
Did you try calling anybody else? That
No,
morning?
not really. I didn't know who else to call because she really didn't talk to anybody or go with anybody. You know, I mean, no, I didn't call the girls. I didn't want to get them all upset. I called them though right after, you know, when I got home. Yeah,
Then the police were there.
yeah, yeah.
We stopped it at 2033. Now, at that time, in the reference that Jim was making to you in the statement, did he indicate to you that he had been calling the girls, meaning Vicky's kids, about her being missing?
No, he said he did not call the girls.
Okay. But then he indicated, I didn't call the girls, I didn't want to get them upset, and then I called them, though, right after when I got home?
Yes, that's what he said, yes, that's
Yep.
correct.
So what do you think happened?
I don't know. I do know she told Stacey or Wes, the next time I do it, because she was mad Wes about her. Next time I do it, nobody's gonna fight.
That was quite a few years ago she said that.
7 years ago.
Closer to maybe.
And that was the second time.
We stopped it at 2102. Now, when you are interviewing suspects in various investigations, do you find that sometimes those individuals attempt to push a theme in order to divert attention on their actions?
That's correct.
In this, there's a statement made by Jim about a reference that Vicky made, and you stated that, well, that was some time ago. Is the remoteness of something like that significant?
Yes, it can be.
Okay. And that's something that's why you're commenting to the individual, that's not something that was just said close in time on that date?
That's correct. It was quite some time ago that she had made that comment that next time she does it, no one's going to find her.
No, it wasn't that time.
Wasn't that? I don't remember. Sure. Because she went in again after that.
But she claims that was an accident.
Yeah, she claimed that was an accident.
Yep. No note was left that time or anything?
No.
You have a burn barrel out here?
Yeah, right over there.
Do you remember some items that were burned in your dumpster? The big dumpster, the green dumpster out here?
He empties the burn barrel in there. The landlord does.
Okay. So you didn't burn anything in there?
Not for a while. We didn't hardly ever burn anything in there.
The landlord burns stuff
The
in the burn
landlord
barrel?
burns quite a bit. Once in a while we'll burn something, but usually I take the garbage, I throw it in the truck, and I throw it in the dumpster at work.
We stopped it at 2153. Now, Jim has just made a reference that he throws garbage in a truck and throws it in the dumpster at work and gets rid of it. Is that right?
That's correct.
So in that statement, is he inferring that he remotely moves things to discard of them?
Yes.
You know, we get a bunch of paper or junk or something, or Wes burns some stuff in it once in a while, but we don't burn garbage in there that often.
When you lived in Pulaski, was there any, she, at that time she was driving, correct?
Yeah,
Why wasn't she driving anymore?
didn't have a car.
And that's the only reason?
Probably, yeah.
Did she ever drive?
She drove the truck once in a while, but,
When was the last time she drove the truck?
oh man, I don't remember. It was
Roughly.
a long time.
Yeah, was it before the surgery?
Yeah, well before the surgery.
Okay. So it had been probably close to over a year, probably.
A couple years.
Yeah, a couple years. Okay. But she still had the ability to drive. She had a valid driver's license. correct?
Yeah, she had a valid driver's license, yes.
Okay. I know you don't know what happened. None of us here know what happened.
No.
But take your best guess.
That's why we got you involved.
I've got no idea. I honest to God don't know. I know how she tried to do it a couple times. And I don't know.
There's a couple facts here that have changed since when the police first interviewed you. Now, let me just tell you, a lot of times what happens is over the period of time, people forget things, people don't remember things. According to the police report, that there were no pill bottles that were found. And you say
I
that...
could have swore I gave them some empty pill bottles.
Yeah, I remember them having some sitting on the table.
Right on the table here.
Okay, according to the police report, they took a picture of a prescription that was just filled out. That she brought home that day. That wasn't filled.
I don't remember. Maybe we did. I don't remember. You're asking a year ago.
I know.
If she got a prescription
I know.
that day.
They dumped her phone records,
Yeah.
and there was only one incoming call to her phone that day. That was at 4:30.
Well, what did they find on mine?
4:36 in the morning. One outgoing call to her, but a number of other outgoing calls. Do you remember calling anybody else that morning?
Probably guys at work.
Okay.
Probably, because I gave them my phone, they asked for it, I said, here it is. You know, you can have, go through, and it's a work phone, you know, company phone.
Sure.
So,
My old infirmed eyes.
Spark, can you Sparks? You want to like get carried by the No. Elsie's the one that likes to get carried by.
You called Vicky at 4:13 a.m.
Yeah.
Call was answered in 0.02 seconds. In other words, it probably went to voicemail.
Yeah.
You called Paul Dahl.
Ooh.
Paul Dahl, D-A-U-L. 920-619-5675.
619-5675.
You called him at 5:08. Call went unanswered. You call him again at 5:08. Call went unanswered. Then you called Mike Shue.
He's sort of my boss.
Is he the landlord here as well?
No, his dad
It's
is.
a different Shue?
His dad is.
And that was at 6:15 a.m. 6:22, then you called Wes.
Yeah, probably.
Just to see if she was home or...
Yeah.
Okay. So one call you made to her to try and see if she
No,
was
I know I called her. I know I tried calling after that. I know I did.
Now, you were just asking Jim about the forensics on his phone. You indicated that there was one call made from Jim's phone to Vicky's at 4:13 a.m. that morning. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that would have been the time frame that he has indicated that he would have been at the house and he didn't leave for work?
That's correct.
Was that concerning to you after he had just made a statement about all these phone calls he tried to make to her?
Yes, it was strange that he said he called her, he mentioned at least 3 times, and the records from her phone show that he only called her once.
But they did show multiple calls to his work individuals?
That's correct.
So, Your Honor, just so it's clear, now the state is playing the second clip.
You know, they told me that. You know, it wasn't like I tried went up and down these roads here, every road practically from here to Green Bay and here to Pulaski. And how she left or where she went or I have no idea.
She was, somebody told me she was walking with a cane
Sometimes.
sometime. Was she pretty mobile though?
Yeah. You'd come home, she'd be tearing around this house cleaning and doing everything. And then
One leg did give out on her.
that one leg she had a problem with. But then you wouldn't think there was anything wrong with her. You'd see her out in the yard tearing stuff up and doing whatever. And then half hour later, she,
Do you remember what she was wearing that day?
she had on like a white coat. She was dressed up, got all cleaned up. I was surprised. I came home from work.
Is that not normal when she has a doctor's appointment?
It's unusual, not unusual. There'd be one time I'd come home and we'd have to go to the doctor. I'd have to get her ass in gear. Come on, hon, we gotta go.
But I mean, what she was wearing.
No, it wasn't unusual. When she got dressed up, it was nothing unusual.
Would she normally get dressed up for the doctor's appointment?
Sometimes she would and sometimes she wouldn't. There'd be times she just,
So it wasn't abnormal for her to be dressed up that
no,
day?
it wasn't abnormal for her to be dressed up. And it wasn't abnormal for her not to get all dressed up and fixed up. I mean, that's the way she was. That's the way she was. It's that simple.
Do you think she had enough pills to hurt herself?
No, not unless she was stashing them because they were almost all due to be, the 2 or 3 prescriptions she had were due to be refilled within a day or two, unless she was hiding some or.
What kind of,
We started at 2:26. Now, Mr. Warwick, you just outright asked Jim if he believed Vicki had enough pills to hurt herself, and he said no. Is that significant?
Yes, because that would be the only way that she would be able to do an overdose to harm herself, would be if she had enough pills.
And he's already told you also in this interview that he's the one who dispensed the pills and had control of that.
He controls the pills,
So he'd have knowledge.
That's correct.
what kind of, do you have internet access here?
I don't, Wes does, but
Computer? Yeah. You pretty computer literate? Yeah? How about Vicki, your mom?
Nope.
No?
Doesn't even know how to turn one on.
Okay.
well, same way. I can't hardly work a damn cell phone, let alone a computer.
What kind of television do you have here?
We had Dish or Direct. Now we just got cable by, what do you call it? Wireless cable. We got cable from a tower.
Okay.
That's the end of that second clip. Now Stacy's playing the third clip.
So you don't think that there's any possibility whatsoever that she just left, that she wanted to get away from here for whatever reason, and is living someplace?
It's possible where she just got tired of everything, and I'm not saying it's impossible. The thing of it is, she left everything that meant a lot to her. Them two furry things down there, and things like that. And she had a picture of the birds, a book with pictures of the birds and that she always had with her, and her, was proud to show people. And that's here. I don't know where it is now. I know I found it once, but it's probably up in the cabinet or
Does she have
something.
access to any money?
If she wanted money, I gave her money.
No, I mean,
We had a checking account. There was nothing out of there.
there was nothing missing.
No.
Did she have the ability to, you say she could just stash pills away, how about cash? Could she just stash cash away?
No.
There's money left in her purse.
Yeah, there was money left in her purse.
No, that's not outside the normal. If someone's
No.
gonna take off, they would leave some money behind,
But no.
You don't think she took off?
I don't know.
You think she
The
hurt her,
way-
you think she hurt herself? Is that what happened? You think?
I hate to say it, but yes, I think that was her intention when she left here.
How would she have done it?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
And why hasn't she been found?
That's what I don't understand either. You know, how harsh could she have gotten? You know, I mean, from around here and you know, I don't know what time she left that night. I know she was still here around 9 o'clock. And I woke up about 3:30, I don't remember, 3:30, somewhere, between 3 and 4. And she wasn't here. So say 6 hours. Now, when she left in that time, I don't know. I have no idea. And it wasn't unusual for me to go to bed at 8 o'clock, 8:30, and her to stay up until midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. All at once you hear a vacuum cleaner running at 1 o'clock in the morning. But it's just, you had to know her. You had to know her. A lot of things she did was not, it's unusual, out of the norm for other people, but it was her way of life, and I accepted it. You know, I mean, I accepted it.
Can I talk to him alone real quick?
We're stopping it at 3:30. Mr. Warwick, you're indicating at that point, asking if I can talk alone. Are there other individuals in the room then leaving the room?
Yes, I requested that I just talk to Jim alone, and everyone else in the room had then left.
Okay. And so at this juncture, you're just alone with him?
That's correct.
Where you going, Spark? Go on. Oh, what, Spark?
Hang with Wes for a minute. There's also been some talk in the police reports about this Kathy that you're seeing.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't want to talk in front of them. Okay.
It's all right. I got nothing to hide.
Okay. Okay. You have a relationship with her now.
Yes, I do.
When did that start?
I knew her about 30 years ago.
Okay. Did you ever date her? Did you have an intimate relationship with her prior to your marriage to
No.
Vicky?
No. We were just good friends. They came out to our place even. Her and her husband, when we lived out on the farm. God, that's got to be... I was with my first wife then. So it's got to be in the 70s sometime. Her and her husband and her kids came out, went to when the rodeo used to be here in town and stuff. But we were just good friends, that's all. Knew her when I drove truck, that's back when CBs were big. Her husband had a truck, and they had a base station. Went by their place a couple times a week, going out west. And
Did Vicky ever know her?
no.
Never met her or anything?
No.
And so after you married Vicky, you never had an intimate relationship with her?
No. I'd call her once every 2 years, 3 years. The cops went out and talked to her.
Here, sure.
I know they did. I told them about her. And I contacted her probably about a month and a half after Vicky disappeared. I'd give or take. I don't remember exactly when it was. And I said, Vicky disappeared. My wife. I didn't know that she had gotten a divorce. I knew she had gotten divorced. And then she was living with this guy for I don't know how long. And I'd call her maybe once a year, once every 2 years.
We're stopping at 5:58. Now, you just asked Jim about his relationship with Kathy. Is that in reference to Kathy Friday?
That's correct.
And he indicated he had had contact with her years ago in an incident with his first wife. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, at the end here, when you're asking him about his contact with Kathy, he indicates that he had contact with her maybe once a year and then says once every 2 years. Is that right?
That's right. That's correct.
Were you aware at that time that he had previously not been disclosing he had had any contact with Kathy for 30 years?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. He's now telling you and admitting to you that he's had regular contact through the years with her.
That's correct.
Different guy from her ex-husband?
Yeah. Yeah. And she lived, he died. And I didn't know he had passed away until I called her after Vicky disappeared. And I said, geez, would you like to meet and just talk? You know, have coffee or something. We met and we just sort of, you know, got with each other. You know, I'm not hiding it from anybody. My son knows about it. The kids know I'm seeing her.
Sure, sure.
You know, and we were good friends back then, and we're good friends now,
And that concludes the third clip, and now we're playing the fourth and final clip.
Let me ask you one more question. If she hurt herself, let's say, for instance, she was rat holing pills
yeah.
with the intention of hurting herself, which doesn't really make sense to me, because why wouldn't she just wait until she got a fresh prescription and do it? But let's say, for instance, she had enough pills to do herself some harm. Where around here do you think she would have went? You know this area? I mean,
I know this. I grew up here. I know this
you know this
area.
area better than I do.
Yeah, I know this area like the back of my hand. Yeah. And I can't imagine where. Yeah. I can't, you know, they asked me, where did she like to go? I said, well, we used to go out to the zoo, the reforestation camp out here. We used to like to go out there once in a while, you know, and we used to go up by Shadow Lake swimming, but as far as...
There's no place around here where you think that she could hide herself?
No.
And not be
She
found?
didn't know enough places around here. She wasn't...
If somehow...
She was from around here, don't get me wrong, but she did not know...
The immediate area.
Yeah.
Now, at the time that you're interviewing Jim, with respect to the questions that you've asked him, at the end of this now, you've just asked him about whether Victoria was familiar with the area and whether it would have been possible for her to walk off. And he said no. Is that right?
That's correct.
But he also told you he knew the area like the back of his hand.
That's correct.
Now, at the time that you were conducting this interview with the defendant, you've asked him a lot of questions about various areas. And in the discussion with Kathy Friday, you were made aware that he had been involved with her in a romantic relationship?
Yes.
In the course of you being an investigator for all of these years, is it significant with respect to homicides to be looking for things that people would benefit from if somebody is deceased in their life?
Yes, that's correct.
Are there various motives that are examined when law enforcement is trying to consider how someone would benefit with respect to moving on with their life?
Absolutely.
With regard to Kathy Friday, the fact that Jim has now indicated to you that he was having regular contact with this woman for years, was that inconsistent with the previous information from law enforcement that they had just chance met sometime after his wife is gone?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, at the time that you are also speaking to Jim, when you get this information, and the jury's now seen that it's recorded, Do you pass this information along to anybody?
Yes, I passed it on to Detective Ernstein.
Okay. And throughout this, your role in this case, who has been the primary member of Vicky's family that you have been dealing with?
Marcia Loritz.
Based upon your interactions with Marcia, was it apparent to you that she had a vested interest in finding her mother?
Absolutely.
I have no further questions.
You may cross.
Mr. Warwick, so prior to meeting with Mr. Prokopovitz, you read all the police reports, correct?
I can't say for sure that I read all the police reports. I read all the reports that were given to me, yes.
So, do you know approximately how many reports you read?
Boy, oh boy, I couldn't tell you. Hundreds of pages.
So walking into that interview, you had somewhat of a preconceived notion in your head as to whether or not Jim had any involvement, true?
Not sure what you mean by a preconceived notion.
Well, you had some version of events in your head, that's why you were asking the questions you asked, correct?
That's correct.
So you had some idea, you had a notion, you didn't walk in this blindly and just was getting this fresh information. You had a preconceived notion based on what police officers gave you.
I would say that's correct. I would say that I went into the interview with an open mind, though, trying to determine. My goal was to find out some facts. I certainly wasn't in the mind frame of solving this case at that point. I was just trying to get some certain facts to find out if it was feasible for me or another private detective to work on this case, parallel investigation with the police.
Okay, so did you review any of Victoria Prokopovitz's medical records prior to this interview?
I did not.
So you were not aware of her ups and downs and sometimes that she wouldn't take her pills?
No.
So it's not inconceivable that this woman could have not taken her pills and stored them away for a later date?
That's not inconceivable, no.
You mentioned that you thought it would be a little odd because she could have got new prescriptions, took her pills, and then done something, but over a history of time, since you didn't have her medical records, you wouldn't know whether or not this woman has a tendency of not taking her pills.
That's correct.
You were not aware that about 6 months or so prior to her going missing that she claimed her pills were stolen, did you?
I was not aware of that.
Okay. And you were also not aware of how many different types of pills that she was on?
No, I was not aware of that.
Did anybody indicate to you that her pill and her medication regimen was constantly getting changed throughout her time?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were asked by the state about her pills and her pill bottles being there or not being there. Were you aware that there was an interview done on April 26, 2013, in which they were discussing that pill bottles were there?
I remember some conflicting information that I had received about whether the pill bottles were there or not in the reports.
Okay. So you're not aware of whether or not Victoria could have been keeping her old pills that she was no longer prescribed available for her, correct?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Now, it was brought up in part of your investigation, and I think it was asked, and the state asked you about her diagnosis, and I think I heard even somebody else in the interview, it wasn't Jim, it sounded like a female's voice, was there daughters in that interview as well?
They were for a time at the beginning of the interview, yes.
And you also heard, it sounded like I heard that they talked about her being potentially bipolar, diagnosed, but not being treated for it.
That's correct.
What is your understanding about somebody being bipolar, that they have up and down and manic moments?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not inconceivable that somebody may have seemed normal at one moment and then took off the next, correct?
That's not inconceivable.
Okay. There was also some discussion about her being OCD and very cleanly. So if somebody was hoarding pills and she was very cleanly, she would have been able to keep those separate from anybody else really knowing about it, true?
Other than the fact that Mr. Prokopovitz was the one that dispensed the pills to her.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. You heard him say that at the time, she could have access to her pills because he kept them in a box, but she knew where the key was, true?
That's correct.
Mr. Prokopovitz goes to work, say from around 5 a.m. and doesn't come back until the afternoon. So she has hours upon hours of being in that house with access to her pills, true?
That would be true.
So it's not inconceivable that she could have gotten her pills without him knowing about it.
That's true.
He also indicated that he would sometimes dispense these pills in like one of those pill dispensers, true?
That's the way I understood it, the like AM, PM, noon.
So again, if he wasn't around, he doesn't know if she's taking her meds or putting them and storing them away, true?
That's true.
Now, it was also brought up, did you do any search around the area when you did this interview, or were you strictly doing an interview that day?
I'm strictly doing an interview. No searching was done by me.
Okay. It was noted, it was brought up, and I think the state brought this up, about this burn barrel or thing. Did you find any evidence in your search or your review of the records that there was any evidence of a body in the burn barrel?
No.
Did you find any evidence of any sort of clothing or signs of debris that somebody tried to dispose of somebody's personal property in the burn barrel?
I did not do, like I said, I didn't do any searching, so I didn't find any evidence of that.
Okay. And as far as your review of the records, you didn't find anybody indicating they found anything in the burn barrel?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Sure. As far as your review of the records that you reviewed prior to the interview, nobody had any evidence that there was anything significant in the burn barrel, like clothing items or a person's ring or something of that nature?
Just some burned items, that was all I had read.
Okay. And when you were having this discussion with Jim and he would talk about Vicky going on these walks, nobody in the room who was there with them when he made this statement objected to that statement, correct? They didn't say, Mom never went for walks at night.
Well, just to understand, previous to us walking in there, I told the girls and the husband that I would prefer if they just didn't say anything. Now, periodically, was hard for them not to say anything, so every now and then they would interject something. So, yeah, I had told them beforehand, just don't say anything in the interview. It didn't work out too well. It wasn't the best scenario for an interview.
Sure. But they never came to you and said, oh, what Jim said was absolutely wrong. She would never walk, correct?
No, they never did.
Were you aware that the girls hadn't seen their mother for a period of 6 months prior to her going missing?
I was aware of that.
So it's not inconceivable to believe that they weren't aware of her physical capabilities since they hadn't seen her in 6 months since the surgery.
That's true.
And Wesley was there, and Wesley never said that that's wrong, that she wouldn't go for walks, correct?
No, he never said that.
He never corrected it when she said that she'd be kind of like I think she'd be cleaning around the house and she was moving around just fine in 1 minute, and then maybe a half hour later she wasn't walking very well.
He never indicated that, no.
In fact, he did say sometimes her leg would get out, but that wasn't all the time.
That's correct.
Now, you were talking about the time frame, and you indicated you read the report that said that he went to bed between, let's say, 8:30, 9 o'clock, one of those times, correct?
That's correct.
And that you brought up specifically that he heard something in the kitchen, true?
That he heard something in the kitchen, that he heard her nuke a cup of coffee.
Did anybody verify that it was exactly her to be nuking the cup of coffee? It could have been Wesley nuking a cup of coffee.
I don't remember reading that it was verified one or the other.
Okay.
Other than the fact that Wesley had left shortly after eating.
Were you aware that Wesley's phone was tagged at the house at 8:30 at night, so he could have still been in the house around that time and been in the kitchen?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, so his phone was pinged by the police, and he was still getting a text message at the Coonish Road property at 8:30.
His phone was pinged?
I'm going to object to the relevancy. He's alibied out. Jim alibis him out as well. Wes isn't there. It's a relevancy.
Your Honor,
So a prior court ruling regarding this.
I'm merely trying to get the time frame and asking his understanding because there's an inference that Jim was the last person to see her in the time frame. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody specifically. I'm just saying I'm trying to get a time frame that whether or not he had this knowledge. I think it's very relevant when he makes a statement that Jim was really, in his mind, the only last person to see her.
That's alibied out. Jim himself says repeatedly he's the last person to see her. He knows that. It's in every interview. Wes is not there. Can we
I don't
approach, Your Honor?
Sure. Objection overruled.
Sir, do you want me to repeat the question or maybe have the court reporter ask it?
Either or is fine.
We have the reporter ask the question, or I just want to make sure this say the same.
All right, the reporter reread the question.
Okay, so his phone was pinged by the police, and he was still getting a text message at the Coolidge Road property at 8:30?
So, sir, to follow up with that is, you were not aware of that, even though that was in prior reports, correct?
I was not aware of that. No.
Okay. Now, moving forward, it's not inconceivable, again, that she could have left sometime after Jim went to sleep, correct?
That's correct.
She could have walked down to the road, started going for a walk, and there's roughly about 6 hours that she could have been walking, correct?
That's correct.
So, there's no telling whether or not she was walking down the road and somebody just picked her up and drove her to either Green Bay or Shawano or whatever, correct?
Correct.
And it was brought up about her suicide attempts, and I think your testimony, if I recall that you're saying this to state, is that she made that statement about not finding her body, that was years ago. But not knowing her medical records, you don't know what her mindset would have been to say whether or not she still was contemplating suicide, correct?
I don't know what her mindset was, no.
Now, it was brought up about Jim's statements, not always remembering the details, and it's been a while since he gave statements. Now, at that time, Jim was roughly about 68, 69 years old, true?
I couldn't say for sure, but that sounds about correct.
Okay. So it's not, again, inconceivable to believe that somebody who is 68, 69 can't remember all the details that he maybe made in one statement to the next, true?
That's true.
And if somebody like Jim, who is a creature of routine and habit, who gets up, goes to work, and comes home, looking at times and time frames aren't always that important, true?
That would be true. I would agree with that.
And that wouldn't be inconsistent with your experience of being a law enforcement and private detective. That older people who generally have a similar routine, they don't always look at the time frame. They just know that they do things certain ways, correct?
I would say that's a true statement. I don't know if I'd refer that back to my experience, but
Okay. It's just a true statement in your mind, though, that's not inconceivable.
no, that's true.
Okay. It was also brought up that Jim did make a phone call to Victoria's phone at 4:13, and that was come off of Jim's phone, true?
I don't recall if that was the dump from Victoria's phone or from Jim's phone. I'm not sure. I think it was Jim's phone because he made some other calls to other people. That's correct.
Okay. So if Victoria's phone was shut off, would it register that somebody called her?
You're talking about something that I don't know anything
Okay.
about.
You're not aware of whether or not that's an issue?
No.
Okay. Now, it was brought up about her dress, and it was said that she sometimes dresses up, sometimes she doesn't, correct?
That's correct.
Sir, during your time and experience, have you ever investigated a suicide or anything of that nature?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Is it uncommon to see somebody dressed up if they're going to commit suicide? If they're somewhat in a better mood, like they're getting ready to go?
It's not uncommon. I don't think it's common either.
But it does happen.
It should.
And then based on your interview, you didn't gather any significant information one way or another about the whereabouts of Victoria Prokopovitch, true?
I did not.
With regards to your conversation with Jim about Kathy Friday, in your investigation, did you find any information that Jim had any contact with Kathy Friday prior to Victoria being missing?
Yes, he said he did.
Did he have any immediate contact prior to Victoria being missing?
I don't believe that he said immediately. I don't know what time frame you're talking about immediately, but
Sure. So let's say within the 6 months of Victoria prior to her going missing, so going back 6 months, during your review of the reports or in the investigation, did you see any evidence of any phone contact or actual contact between Jim Prokopovitz and Kathy Friday?
no, he said he would just call her once or twice, every 1 or 2 years.
Okay. And you didn't see any reports that indicated that there was any phone contact right up to the time she went missing?
I did not.
Okay. And that wouldn't have been part of your investigation. You just rely on what was provided to you and what Jim told you, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't do any follow-up to that information either, did you?
I did not.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, thank you. Now, you were just asked questions relating to, according to the defense, asking you about admitted contact with Kathy Friday by Jim. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Now, in your discussions with Jim, he indicated that he had, I think the direct quote was, spoke to her every year and then indicated, or at least every 2 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were you made aware at some point that he was indicating to investigators and others that he hadn't had any contact with Kathy Friday and then just a chance meeting 30 years later?
Not aware of that at all.
All right, because your interview with them was 2014, is that right?
That's correct.
So anything that would have occurred in court hearings in 2019 where the defendant claimed under oath that he hadn't had contact, but then confessed later that he did, you weren't aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
In the course of your dealings as an investigator with alleged suspects, is it important if you would learn that somebody would say one thing and then admittedly lie later?
Very important.
Particularly if somebody's under oath and told you have to tell the truth, but then later confess to lying? would that be significant?
Yes,
And as an investigator, you indicated that you had worked all of these years, private investigator, law enforcement, I think 47 years. You've interviewed a lot of suspects?
I have.
And you have worked on homicide cases.
I have.
Have you worked on cases where somebody can outright tell you one thing and then you later learn that it's a complete lie?
That's true, yes, I
Is it
have.
important in these interviews for you to pick up on any type of cues as far as how somebody answers a question?
Yes,
If somebody's involved in a homicide and there's an incident of discord between two people or a fight, is that significant?
yes,
So on this date, when you're asking Jim about whether or not he had a fight or argument with Victoria that evening, it was significant you testified that he said no, 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 3 times,
that's correct.
and that's a red flag.
Yes,
Now, at the time that you're also speaking to Jim, you were just asked by the defense about some of these pills and the access of Victoria to pills. Do you recall that?
yes,
And specifically, the defense said that, well, if Victoria was hiding these pills, they wouldn't be accessible. But while you're in that interview talking to Jim, doesn't he indicate to you that he's got those pills locked up?
he did.
He describes he dispenses those pills to Victoria?
He did.
So based upon his words, who's indicating that they had control of the medication to Victoria?
Jim Prokopovitch.
And in your discussions, the defense just asked you about the money in the household and access. Who indicated that they had access to the money available to Victoria?
Jim Prokopovitz.
And you're asked a lot about what is inconceivable. When Jim has just told you he's in control of money, and you're hearing there could be a dispute over getting a tablecloth, Jim is the one that would provide the money for that. Is that right?
That would be correct.
And Jim is the one who provides rides to Victoria around this time.
That would be correct.
He's indicated to you in the interview she doesn't have access to a car, right?
That's correct.
So as far as the plausibility of that argument occurring, that isn't inconceivable to have occurred on that night.
That's not inconceivable.
Were you aware that Wes also had indicated that he recalls there being this disagreement between his parents at the dinner table that night?
I don't recall that whether Wes was questioned about that or not.
Okay, because this is now 2014 when you're doing your conversation with Jim.
Correct.
All right. Now, based upon the information that you were just asked, you were also just asked if a time frame is not significant or important based upon someone's similar routine. Do you recall that?
Yes,
But when you do interviews, is it important for you to be examining a time frame to determine consistencies in information
yes,
and inconsistencies in information?
that's correct.
So a time frame can be very important.
Yes,
You were also asked if it isn't inconceivable that a person 69 couldn't recall details. Is that right?
yes,
In your discussions with Jim, were there times where it seemed more convenient than others that he couldn't recall something?
yes. It seemed like he would recall certain details, inconsequential details, but didn't recall other things.
So let's talk about that with the burn barrel. The defense just asked you about this burn barrel. At the time that you're asking Jim if he's utilizing this burn barrel that's on his property, did it appear to you that he was deferring that he used it? He actually opened the option the landlord was?
That's correct.
But then was it significant that he then made the statement that he was moving things off the property in his truck to dispose of it at work?
That's correct.
Did you know at that time that he was working near sludge ponds? Was that available to you?
I did know that.
Okay. And lastly, you were asked a lot of questions about conceivable, inconceivable. In this interview, you were just asked regarding whether or not Victoria could have taken an overdose. In this interview, who's the person who told you it probably was inconceivable that she would have overdosed? Who's the person that said no?
Jim
When you asked Jim whether or not it was conceivable that she had probably taken off, who told you that it wasn't?
Jim,
And when you were asked and questioned him regarding whether it was reasonable that she wouldn't have been found, who told you that he agreed that that didn't make sense?
Jim,
So the words that you're getting out of this interview by James Prokopovitz, those words did matter, didn't they?
they did, absolutely, yes.
I have nothing further.
Further cross?
So, sir, when it comes to the state saying that Jim had only the control of the pills, he also indicated to you that she had access to these pills, correct?
That's correct.
The state didn't also indicate, but there was other pills in the house because Wesley was also on pills, true?
I had no knowledge of that.
So she has these pills that she has access to, she could have been hoarding, true?
That's true.
They say that, well, Jim was controlling money, but money was found in her wallet, true?
It's true.
So we don't know if she was given money and she just kept it because she didn't go anywhere, right? So if she had money, she could have been putting it somewhere else other than in her purse or anywhere else, true?
That's true.
So you can't say for certain that she didn't have access to funds.
No.
And when it comes to rides, Wesley was in the house. If she wanted to go somewhere, she asked Wes, she could have had Wes take her for a ride, correct?
I don't even know if Wes drove. Well, yes, he did drive, but I don't know if she requested rides from him periodically or not.
Okay. You're not aware that Wes took her to doctor's appointments sometimes?
I never heard that, no.
Okay. And when there was a question of, is it Jim doesn't know what happened to her? Is it because he may just not know that if she walked off, got into a car, committed suicide somewhere where we haven't even looked, he doesn't know where she is, true?
I don't know what's in his mind.
Okay. So that would be also true when, I think specifically, it talked about him saying no, no, no 3 times. That could just be the way his speech pattern is, true?
That's the only time he said that during my interview.
Okay. He's an older guy, and he's just running it through his head. He could have said, no, 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 that doesn't...
Object to asked and answered. The witness already gave his opinion on that, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Thank you.
Now, with regards to the discussion about Kathy, how they met, it could be believed that he didn't think that was a significant fact, true?
I didn't think it was significant how they met.
And it was asked about, you were asked about Jim and his lying about how him and Kathy Friday met, correct?
I don't believe that he lied about how him and Kathy met.
The state just said you didn't know about what was testified in 2019, correct?
Correct.
So if Jim didn't tell police officers how him and Kathy met because he didn't think it was a significant fact, that's not unbelievable to believe as well, right?
I'm going to object to lack of foundation. We just had the witness testify. He's not aware of what came out of that hearing, and now he's told him that, and now he's still asking about it.
Your Honor, the state brought it up. She's the one that suggested that he was lying, and it was brought up in a 2019 hearing. I'm merely asking a follow-up question to the state where she opened the door.
Well, no, he shut me down too, indicating he didn't know about it, so I moved on.
Overruled. Can you answer the question?
The only thing I can testify to is what Jim told me is how him and Kathy met. And if you wanted me to review that with you again, I can do that.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You're excused. Jurors will take the mid-morning 15-minute recess. the presence of the jurors? No? All right, court's in recess.